gone on holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do something relatively unusual, and I'm sure my colleagues will come back and rebut the comments made by the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, and I want to thank you for letting him run on and effectively do the second reading rebuttal as part of the committee stage, because the debate is now so broad that all of our members will want to have a go at least twice and possibly up to 4 times as they are allowed, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like, though, to do something slightly unusual, and that is to focus on the detail of the bill, and in particular the detail of the Act which it is proposed to amend. But, Mr. Speaker, I will start, as the Minister briefly referred to, was the regulatory impact statement, and to inform him that the 6.6% increase, percentage increase in petrol excise duty to which he referred was on the 1st of October 2010. And in case the member does not remember, that was when he was Minister of Transport and in charge of the area. And to blame the Labor government and say it was a Labor Party increase, was just clearly wrong. But it shows, Mr. Speaker, the grip on detail that occurs when you put either Stephen Joyce or Jerry Brownlee in charge of these areas. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note that the proposed increases are at about double the rate of inflation. And so what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, over a period of this government is a transfer of the effect of taxation from those on high incomes to those who are on low incomes. There is no doubt that this is a regressive tax, something that is pushed onto people, especially poorer people in country areas, people in rural, people in cities who do not have the public transport alternatives, and people who are forced to use their cars. In particular, I think of my constituency of Wainuiomata. And while in some places and at some times the public transport is relatively good, in other parts and at certain parts of the weekend and in the evenings, then people are just forced to use their cars because the public transport is not properly available. And what this does, sir, is push back into them. The question I want to get to, though, and I apologise, I was unable to be in the House for the Minister's speech on the first or second readings, but what I'm slightly surprised at when one looks carefully at this bill is an indication as to whether it is necessary or not. Mr. Speaker, my reading of the Custom and Excise Act, section 79A, as it was amended in the latest set of amendments, is that there is already a regulation-making power sitting there for the Minister to increase excise rates in this particular way. And Mr. Speaker, I'm left with a dilemma here as to the reasoning on the part of the National Party for taking this approach. Now one could be, and it would be fair to say, slightly cynical that they are doing this now rather than passing regulation later on at the appropriate point of time in order to make their budget figures look good. Yep. Because, Mr. Speaker, we do not need to be here, theoretically according on the wall on a Thursday, but actually on a Saturday afternoon debating legislation, because the government already has the power to do these sort of changes under regulation. They don't need this legislation to do it, but methinks one of the reasons that they are doing it is in order to gerrymander their budget figures and to get it into the budget, to do it part of the budget legislation in order to create an illusionary surplus through this method, rather than using the regulation-making powers which already sit within here. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be even slightly more cynical, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be even slightly more cynical still and ask the question. Well, Mr. Speaker, I like the compliment from my teenage friend, Mr. Hipkins. But, Mr. Speaker, at this midpoint of career, I accept that I'm not that young.
Your love child.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the point that I would now like to make in a slightly more cynical way, but nothing would surprise me about Stephen Joyce and his cynical approach, is that by passing this way, the government leaves open the option of also regulating for more. And the question I am asking is whether we are having this change now so that the National Party at some stage later on can hit motorists up again for yet another increase. And, Mr. Speaker, for most, I would have said most of the time, even Bill Birch, I wouldn't have said that about, because Bill tended to be pretty transparent. Muldoon would just tell you if he was going to do something like this. There'd be no surprises from Sir Robert. But I'm not sure, with Mr. Joyce in charge of this part of the finances, whether in fact what he is doing are using the powers that are available under 79A1, the power to alter rates of excise duty and excise equivalent duty on motor spirits by order in council. Annually, that's right. So what we can do is what they can do is that they can do this 3 cents in July, and they can do an annual change in January as well. So in fact, instead of having one set of 3 cent increases a year, they could have two. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that there are some people, and some people who may well be future colleagues, who think that that's a good thing. And that they would want to, some people would want to keep on increasing the rate of exercise in that way. And what I want to say to my Green colleagues is, thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your honesty. Much unlike Jerry Brownlee, who appears to be taking this approach for 2 reasons. One, to gerrymander the budget figures, but secondly, under the sections which are in the, I thought it says B48S. It doesn't say BS48. It's B48S, Mr. Speaker. This amendment to the 1996 Act, which has the power which appears to be reserved and preserved. So reserved and preserved by this amendment, the power to have increases in excise tax other than that which we are addressing now on an annual basis. So what, and maybe they are, going for 2 hits a year. And if they are, it'll be interested to hear from the Minister. Says he hasn't decided yet the level of the next increase. He's shaking his head. Has he decided the level of the next increase? And he shakes his head. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's fair enough. Well, I tell you what, I think they've only got one more chance at it. The 1st of January 2014 will be their last chance. They'll probably do it on holiday. It'll be the audit, the last order in council of the year, the one which has the Christmas cake with the Governor-General. It'll be Christmas cake for the Governor-General and Mr. Brownlee, and at the same time, the Governor-General will be signing off yet another increase in excise taxes, excise duties, on budget. No, it won't be budget measures, because that's a different set of amendments, Mr. Speaker. The other area, Mr. Chairman, which I think I will get on to in my next call, relates to the main method, which is in clause 5. Clause 5 is a very important. It is really the operative clause, and what this does. Well, Mr. Speaker, I think to be absolutely fair, I'm sure that it was Mr Joyce, not Mr Brownlee, who said this made it clearer. We know what Mr Joyce is up to, Mr Chairman.
Julianne Gender.
Point of order, Mr Chairman. Point of order, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Trevor Mallett.
Mr Chairman, sorry, I was just making sure you had a minister in the chair.
I did.
Thank you.
I'm calling Julianne Gender.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I rise to speak on Part 1 of the Custom and Excise Budget Measures Motor Spirits Amendment Bill. What Clause 4 of Part 1 of this bill does is say that the petrol tax will be going up 3 cents a litre every year for the next 3 years, starting this year. And essentially, what I'd like to focus on in this part of the bill is the reasons why the government has to put up the petrol tax. It's very clear from the regulatory impact statement that the government has to put up the petrol tax because people are driving less. They haven't been driving as much for over 5 years now, and that is due to a number of factors. It's due to oil prices being much higher. It's due to the fact that we haven't seen the anticipated level of economic growth. It's due to the demographic factors, like younger people, younger generations are waiting longer to get their driver's license, and they're less interested in owning a car. They're much more interested in owning a smartphone, connecting with people in other ways, living in vibrant towns and cities, urban areas where they can walk and cycle, take public transport, and not be forced to spend thousands of dollars a year owning a car, maintaining it, taking it in for a woof. They would like smarter transport options. And what's been happening over the past few years, we know from data from Ministry of Transport, is that public transport boardings are up. So I'd like to explain the minister's, to the minister, based on his comments earlier, how it is that an economic instrument works. What the minister said during his speech was that back when petrol was very expensive, lots of people took public transport. So wouldn't we expect that, given that petrol has become much more expensive, the price of it has doubled in the last decade, and the International Monetary Fund says we can quite realistically expect it to double again in the next 10 years. So wouldn't we expect that even more New Zealanders are going to be wanting to take public transport, are going to be wanting to walk and cycle and leave the car at home if they can? And wouldn't we want to be putting most of the transport budget into infrastructure that gives New Zealanders the choice, that gives them the ability to avoid paying huge amounts of money on petrol? Wouldn't we want to give them those choices? And that's not what the government is doing. What they are doing is putting up the petrol tax and then saying we're going to put the vast majority of this money that we raise, the revenue we raise through the petrol tax, into a few motorways that carry a relatively small percentage of vehicle trips, about 4% of daily vehicle trips collectively on all the roads of national significance that remain to be built. We're putting all of that money into a few very expensive solutions that don't actually solve a problem. Because vehicle trips are down, there are smarter ways to deal with congestion, and part of the way that we deal with congestion and safety is actually investing in alternatives so New Zealanders can take public transport, walk and cycle, which is a safer way of getting around, reduces road accidents, reduces the cost of road maintenance, and reduces the need to expand road capacity because it moves more people at peak time for a lower cost. Wouldn't that be a rational economic approach to the future of our transport investment for New Zealand? And hey, there's lots of good things about putting up petrol tax. See, the great thing about an economic instrument is that it encourages efficiency. So we could expect, if New Zealanders get enough advance warning, that petrol is going to be more expensive in the future, petrol tax is going to be higher. Therefore, when they look at buying a new car, they'll consider that, and they might buy more fuel-efficient cars. But the other impact we could expect them to, the other behavior we could expect them to respond with is to drive even less. So why would we be spending the vast majority of the money on a few new motorways when we know that putting up